Hey friends, I'm Lynn Debilzen, and welcome to Redraw Your Path, a podcast where I share stories of people who have made big changes in their lives and forged their own unique paths. I talk with guests about their moments of messiness, fear, and reframing on their way to where they are now. My goal is to inspire you about the shape your life could take. So let's get inspired. Hey y'all, it's your friend Lynn, and I'm really excited to share another great interview with you. Today I'm sharing an interview with Sophia Demas. Sophia has enjoyed 3 diverse careers, a decade in architecture that included working with famous 20th century visionary Dr. R. Buckminster Fuller, running her own couture fashion business, and working as a mental health therapist in private practice. She also created Living a Fearless Life, a 12-workshop program designed to help society's most at-risk women increase their self-esteem, which was piloted in the Philadelphia prison system and implemented with various groups of at-risk women. Sophia has experienced a miracle-filled life, which is chronicled in her memoir, The Divine Language of Coincidence: How Miracles Transformed My Life After I Began Paying Attention. The miracles were too numerous to cram into one book, that she plucked out the ones that related to death, which are included in her second book, Consciousness Beyond Death: True Stories of Signs, Messages, and Timing. Both books have garnered the attention of scientists, and Sophia was invited to join the scientific and medical network as the only non-scientist academic. Currently, she is employed by the Salvation Army as the in-house counselor at a residence that houses ex-trafficked women. She lives in Philadelphia with her husband, Frank, who is an architect. Welcome, Sophia, to Redraw Your Path today. How are you?
I'm great, and thank you for inviting me.
Oh, I'm so excited to dive into your story because I know it's full of twists and turns and lots of coincidences and all of the things. So, Sophia, I'd like to bookend listeners with where you started life. So, can you give me some context about where and how you grew up?
Okay, so my parents are Greek, from Greece. So my father came here when he was 15 years old in 1909, and he didn't go back to Greece until 1950 to see his family.
Wow.
And he had no desire to get married, and he was 57 at the time. I write about this in my book, about how my parents met and how my mother was not interested. And then my aunt, who fixed them up, concocted a chance meeting. And then it was like love. And they got married 14 days later. And he brought her to the United States. And I popped out a year later, and then my brother a year later. So they were a generation older. And he was one of the most interesting people, completely self-made, born in a dirt poor village in Greece. And he worked most of his life at the Ford Motor Company as an assembly person.
Okay.
But the way he made his money, completely self-taught, English and the stock market. So when the Depression hit, he had $10,000 saved because he would send money back to his family. And he had been studying the stock market, and he had set his sights on National Cash Register. He was like one of the first techies. So all his money in one basket, and that's where he made his money. But because of money issues, he stayed at the Ford Motor Company until he retired at 65, because then he could have a pension. And at the time, the Ford Motor Company they were giving undergraduate scholarships to their employees' kids. So then when I was 7.5, when my father was 65, we moved to Greece. And well, we had no relatives in Dearborn, actually. It was Dearborn, Michigan. Instantly, I had this extended family with all these cousins, and it was just this absolutely miraculous childhood. And then when the Cuban Missile Crisis hit in 1961, he freaked out because he thought that Greece was this ideal geographic location, and the communism would set in. He just brought us back to the States. And we didn't even know where we were going to live. When we landed, we took the boat, the ship, and landed in New York. This is really hysterical because it gives you an idea of who this guy was. But he had made a list of 21 cities on the West Coast that he had worked as a young man. And the whole trip, he was like looking at this list, and every once in a while he'd slam his hand on the table and cross one out. So when we got to New York, all were crossed out but three. Okay. Mm-hmm. So it was Portland, Oregon, San Francisco, and Los Angeles.
Okay.
And I remember sitting on my little blue suitcase because it was so immediate that he brought us over that we were going to let our relatives know where we are so they could send our stuff. Everything was packed. And there was this poster on the wall. This is the port. And it says Oregon, and O is this big sun. And he goes, "We're going to go to Portland, Oregon."
Ah.
And my mother goes, "Where's that?" And he goes, "It's right above California. Look, it's the sun. It only rains 17 days a year." And he would always make up stories. And now we go from the ship to a train because he feels that his kids need to see their country. 3 days in the train. I mean, my mother's completely tired. And when we got to Portland, it was pouring rain, and my mother flips out. She flipped out. And so my father put us in this hotel suite, and he says, "I'm going to go and I'm going to take a trip down to California and LA and decide which one, I'll see you back here in 10 days. Okay, no cell phones." So 10 days later, he shows up and he says, "LA was too flat and San Francisco was too hilly. So we're staying here." And it was great. I am convinced he went nowhere.
Really?
He just went fishing or something. Yeah. And just had his little quiet time, and then just shows up and says that we're going to stay here. And it was a really wonderful growing up. And then I went to university in Eugene, Oregon. And then when I graduated in architecture, and that is its own little journey, I had met my idol. My idol was Buckminster Fuller.
Okay.
He invented the geodesic dome. And as the universe would have it, not only did I meet him, but we had a correspondence, and he asked me to work with him after I graduated. So that's how I got to Philadelphia.
Wow. And it's interesting, your childhood, it sounds like there's some adventure. There's your father as a very strong character and does a lot of research and takes risks.
Yes.
Right. But your childhood was a mix of Michigan, Greece for a few years, Portland, Oregon. Were there any expectations that your parents raised you and your siblings with, or molds that they were hoping for out of your lives?
Oh, yes. Okay. So my brother was going to be a doctor. And because I was artistic, my mother felt that the only thing I can do as a woman with it is teach. Okay. And I went along with it. And my major is art education. And on my senior year, I had 6 more hours of coursework and my student teaching. And I have this dream, this very short little dream. And so the doorbell rings, and it's the mailman. I open the door and he hands me this envelope. And I open the envelope, and it's my teaching license. And I look at it and I go, "I don't want to teach." And I threw it in this little waste paper basket. And I woke up and I'm like, "Oh my God, what am I doing?" And I marched over to the registrar's office. And I thought on the way, it's okay, what do I want to do? Oh, I want to be an archaeologist. So they didn't have an archaeology department. So I changed into art history. Well, you can imagine my father having the fit of fits.
I can.
Oh, it was so funny, but he kind of went along with it. And then I got a scholarship to study Etruscanology in Italy.
Okay.
So that that made him proud. So he kind of went along with it. And it was in Italy where my roommates, like we would be up smoking Gauloise cigarettes and pontificating and philosophizing. And one of my roommates asked me, he said, if you could be with anyone, dead or alive, for half an hour throughout history, who would it be?
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea who I said, and it doesn't matter. So I said, well, who would it be for you? And he said, Buckminster Fuller.
Okay.
And I'm like, wait a second. I mean, I knew that he had invented the geodesic dome, but of all of humanity,
That's who you'd choose?
and so he gets up and he brings me this very thin little book called No Secondhand God. I took it and read it. It was like a 39-page poem. I was blown away by this man. I mean, we're talking like a modern day Leonardo da Vinci. I started reading everything I could about him.
Okay.
And that's when I decided I wanted to go into architecture.
Wow. How many years into school were you by that point?
I was maybe 5, okay, because
Okay.
then I applied to architecture school, and that was a 5-year program. So from beginning to end, it was 10 years when I got my diploma. But that's what I wanted. And my father, when I told him I was now switching again, he cut me off financially. And
Oh
I didn't
no.
care. I mean, you tell me that I can't do something, that's all you have to do to make me do it. So I got some loans and I had a job. And the first 6 months were the worst. I mean, just we had statistics and just the science and environmental control systems. And I did it. I did it.
Mm-hmm.
And then we were going to have this big review. And so my boyfriend brought my parents to Eugene, Oregon. And this was so amazing. I could not have, no one could have choreographed this better than God. Okay. Okay. So I've done this on my own now until this 6 months
Mm-hmm.
into my studies. So I'm standing there with my father and my two professors, the statistics and the environmental control guy, come up to me because they had told me that the project I had chosen was too difficult. Like, excuse me, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and so very sort of, I don't know, it was just, oh, we don't want you to worry your pretty little head about.
Yeah. We don't want you to hurt yourself. Keep it easier.
So one of them puts out his hand. He goes, here, put it here. He said, we are so impressed with what you did. Congratulations. And my father's looking at this. And so I said, oh, doctor, so whatever his name was, this is my father. And daddy, this is the professor, and this is the other professor. And to him, professors were like gods, demigods,
Mm.
because he had a second grade education, and money spigot got turned on.
Interesting.
Yep, because I proved to him that I wasn't playing around anymore. If
Yeah.
you're gonna congratulate me, then he's gonna pay for it.
Yeah. How powerful. And I can imagine that built your self-efficacy too, to believe and actually be able to do that on your own.
Right, I did it. So Mr. Fuller became my idol. I read everything I could about him. So one of my friends was the president of the student council. He knew how much I was gonzo over Buckminster Fuller. And he comes over to the apartment and he says, guess who's coming to lecture on Tuesday? I said, Buckminster Fuller. And he said, I'm going to pick him up from the airport with his wife. Do you want to come along?
Really?
And he said that there were students that were offering him $100 to ride along with him, but he knew how passionate I was. And that was it. We just kind of fell in love with each other, and both him and his wife. And we kept a correspondence. And
Mm-hmm.
then when I graduated, he asked me to work with them. Yeah. And so all of these experiences have formed my philosophy of how things work.
Awesome. I love that. It sounds like you had your childhood and you grew up with expectations of being an art teacher. And it sounds like your expectations from your father were work hard, do what you're supposed to, right? Stay in line, kind of. And you were already redrawing outside of that path. Can you, before we like get into all the turns, can you share with listeners where and how you spend your days now? I like to bookend, like, how did you start and where are you now? And then let's go back through the journey.
Okay, so here's my basic philosophy of life. Okay, very basic. I believe there is a divine intelligence who knows what's best for us better than we do. And this divine intelligence communicates with us through consciousness, through our intuition. Okay, so it communicates with us through dreams, through putting a stranger in front of us that says exactly what we needed to hear, or puts coincidences in front of us.
Okay.
And those are nudgings. Those are nudgings because this divine intelligence wants us to be happy and find our true purpose. So when I was in architecture school, for example, all I wanted to do was design the beautiful building. That's all. I wanted to design space that created emotion in people. And so working for Buckminster Fuller, who was just this, I mean, his whole thing was to help humanity. And by designing the geodesic dome, it was like you can cover more space with the lightest fabrics. And that was my project, was the fly's eye house, which was going to eradicate the world's shelter problem. And it wasn't attractive and it didn't matter because the helping humanity was more important than beauty.
Okay.
And it changed my perception of things. But then my last stint in architecture was designing biotechnology laboratories, and you can't get further from beauty than that. And I have to have beauty in my life. So I quit, started an evening gown dress designing business.
Wow. Okay. So how long were you in architecture then?
A decade. It was a decade in architecture, a decade with my business. Okay, so what happened? I just wanted to design beautiful clothes for beautiful women. Well, that got boring real quick because a beautiful woman, you can put like a bag on her and she's still beautiful. So what interested me, again, now we're going back to problem solving, was the so-called problem figure. So I had two great assistants, and we produced 30 sumptuous evening gowns for pregnant women.
Okay.
Which
Wow.
we would rent, okay, for the weekend, because then you're not pregnant anymore, right?
Yep.
And this put me on the map. This put me on the UP, across the country. And then I went into very large women. And what I noticed was that some of my beautiful, rich clients had no self-confidence. And then my super large clients were just like, hey, girl, boom, 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 complete confidence. I thought, what's wrong with this picture?
Interesting.
And what I decided it was low self-esteem was the culprit.
Okay, that root cause.
Because I thought something was wrong, that this beautiful, rich woman who has no confidence puts on a dress and all of a sudden is happy. I'm like, it goes deeper than that. So I went back to school and graduated in counseling psychology when I was 50.
Whoa, these are big turns, Sophia.
But you know what? It's all problem solving and it's all going to my true purpose. Okay. Because I don't want to come back. I don't want to reincarnate. I've had the most beautiful life. I just don't want to. And besides, I mean, what if climate change goes berserko? I just don't want to come back. And I believe that God is listening to me and that my mission is to be helpful to other people.
Have you seen that string throughout your turns in college for 10 years and then architecture for 10 years and fashion design? Have you seen that helpful string throughout there, or what drove you?
Yeah, each one of my professions, I wanted to just create beautiful buildings, to solving the problems, then creating beautiful dresses, to making the problem figure feel sexy to kind of help. And then when I graduated in counseling psychology, I designed a 12 workshop program because now I feel like, okay, we have to tackle self-esteem. I called the program Living a Fearless Life.
Okay.
And it was piloted in the Philadelphia prison system. And it was incredible because the board did not give me the money. It was 32 men and 2 women. And they did not give me the money because it wasn't studied. I mean, you have to study that self-esteem is good for you. So I got a grant, a $10,000 grant, and did it for different groups of at-risk women and saw what it did. I mean, the administrators at the prison actually testified for me and said, we have seen behavioral change in a very short period of time. And that was not good enough.
Wow.
So fast forward, I retired and I was seeing clients at home. And I was not, this was just about 6 months ago, I was not in the market for a job.
Okay. Okay.
But the job fell on my lap, okay? And it is exactly what I'm talking about, my true purpose. So my employer is the Salvation Army. They do so much good. They have a program, Good Day, which is to help trafficked and ex-trafficked women. And they have a residence for ex-trafficked women who want to do a whole new redraw, you know?
Yeah.
I'm the in-house counselor, and it's a whirlpool of trauma, but I can see how they're responding. So that's kind of my thing.
Yeah, that you have taken a lot of turns to get there, and that's really beautiful what you're doing now. I've done some anti-trafficking education and work in my time as a Peace Corps volunteer, and so I
Yes.
know the importance of what you're doing. I'm curious, as you were going through some of those turns, I mean, architecture to fashion to mental health counseling, what was coming up for you, or was there any self-doubt coming up for you at all as you were making those turns?
No. Okay, so this illustrates how my philosophy was formed about coincidences being placed in your path. God gave us free will, okay?
Mhm.
And I have a very strong will. So I had decided I did not want to get married. I did not want children. And so I was successful at being single until the age of 45.
Okay. Can I ask, Sophia, was the reason you knew you didn't want to get married and didn't want to have children, was it because that's what everybody else was doing, or was there another reason?
No, well, my careers were very important to me, but I had sort of commitment issues. I mean, I had issues with the idea of marriage because I felt it would trap me. I would feel
Okay.
trapped.
Okay.
Some other people, their thing is abandonment. They don't want to get married because they don't want to be abandoned. Or mine was entrapment, you know.
Okay.
But I met someone that I swear, if I said, oh, you know, Frank, I want to hang naked from the chandelier at the Ritz lobby, he would say, what time would you like me to take you? So it was just kind of the right. And I also, because I didn't want to come back, I thought you come back to work on your issues. I don't want to come back and work on the same issue. So I proposed the marriage. And later, when I told him why, he said, you used me. And I'm like, well, yeah, so you benefited too. And then in 2011, I had no desire to meet up with a medium, but coincidentally, I did.
Okay.
And she told me I was going to write a book. And I said, I'm sorry, but that's not in the cards. I said, first of all, I have nothing to write about. But I said, I'm a people person, and there is no way that I'm going to sequester myself somewhere and write a book. She let me get it all out. And then she said, word for word, Spirit says, when she's ready, there are many spirits here to help her and many hands on earth. And so what happened in 2011, oh, this was like 16 years ago, 17 years ago, I was reconnecting with a childhood friend, and I told her my latest miracle. And she said, oh, these things only happen to you, which I've heard over and over again. But this time something clicked.
Okay.
Because, I mean, everybody has a miracle story or a coincidence story, but there's so many that happened. So I just really thought about it. And then it came to me as to why so many happened to me. I believe that divine intelligence puts the coincidence in our path.
Mm-hmm.
And what I did, which is the key to possibly getting exactly what you want, which is the miracle, is to take action. So when we get the coincidence and we take action on the coincidence, we co-create with the creator. We become
Oh.
co-creators and we get the miracle. So that's what happens. So it just was, okay, this is what I'm doing.
Ah.
I'm writing the book because I had honed my intuition.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and these miracles started when I was 19. So it's just been a journey. When you have a coincidence and you take action on it, and then you get a miracle, you start trusting your intuition more. And then you start acting more and you take
Mm-hmm.
action. And the action now, again, co creates the next miracle.
Okay.
So you get to a point where you just don't worry about it because if it doesn't work out, then the obstacle was there for a reason.
It sounds like the key is really the openness, the curiosity, letting your intuition guide, and then,
Recognize the coincidence and then take action.
okay, okay. Do you have a really good example of a time where you recognized a coincidence? And then, I mean, I know you've shared a few already, but do you have another example of one of those?
Okay, I'll give you two short ones. And I do not believe that one miracle is bigger or lesser than the other miracle. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
but some are more important. So these two little coincidences happened to benefit our wedding. Okay,
Okay.
so Frank and I decided that we were going to get married on 4th of July, and the date was 4th of October, which is 3 months later. So, the venues were taken and the music was taken. But I just thought, I don't care. I have a friend who's an event planner, so she can take a warehouse and make it beautiful. So I wasn't really worried about it. So timing is very important. At that time, I call my friend Anne at her studio, and a man answers that's not her husband. And I said, hello. I said, is Anne there? And this man says, Sophia, is that you? He goes, you called me. It's Jerry. Look, I just got out of the shower. I'm late for a meeting. Can I call you back later? I'm like, now I recognized his voice because he has a strong Greek accent. But how did he recognize mine? And I went, listen, I said, Jerry, you have to call me back. Okay. I mean, you have to call me back. This is a wrong number. Tell me your number. So I had misdialed the last digit.
This is way before cell phones for listeners that are young and maybe didn't know. You used to have to dial phone numbers.
And I'm like, but what are the chances that I would dial a wrong number and get somebody else on the line that I knew? I
Yeah,
mean,
very little. I mean,
and so he did call me. It just so happened that during this window of time, Jerry owned the Barclay Hotel on Rittenhouse Square, this beautiful old world hotel. And as a result of that wrong number, he gave me the ballroom for free for our wedding.
wow. Did he know
And
you were looking?
oh, yeah, because I told him that, yeah, I told him this is what's going on with me.
Hmm.
And then he threw in the presidential suite for 2 nights. And then in return, he asked if he and his girlfriend could be invited to our wedding.
Wow. That is amazing, the timing.
The timing, all of it. Okay.
Hmm.
Okay. So the next one, it would be interesting to see which one you think is stranger. Okay. So I am now at my studio, my dress designing studio, and I get a call from this woman. And she says, oh, I found your driver's license. And I went, oh, thank you. And she told me where she found it. And we determined that she lives 2 blocks away because she wants to know how to give me my driver's license. So I said, just put it through the mail slot. which she did. And she had a lovely little note with it that because it was an Oregon driver's license and she loved Oregon and she went there with her boyfriend every year. Okay, thank you very much. 2 months later, now, the wedding is kind of going on. And I get another phone call from her. And she says, I know this is going to sound a little strange, but I just found your ATM card.
Oh.
So I would go to this one ATM, it would spit it out right away. But this time I went to one that kept the card until it said, do you want to do another transaction? Because I was used to having the card spit out at the beginning, I left the screen. So the next person who came to do a transaction, they could clean out my whole account.
Yeah. Was it this woman though?
Yes, she was the next person to go to that ATM machine.
Oh my gosh.
So she said, would you like me to put it through your mail slot? I said, no, we've got to meet.
Yeah.
We've got to meet. You've got to come to my studio. So I had this handmade soap from Oregon. And here comes this lovely young woman who happened to be a concert violinist. And we were just talking. And one of my favorite pieces of music is Concierto de Aranjuez by Romero Brothers. And I said, oh, do you know it? She goes, oh, of course I know it. So she got her friend who does the classical guitar to play at our wedding for a wedding present.
Wow.
So which one do you think is stranger?
This is a good question. I feel like, I mean, the same woman finding your driver's license and finding your ATM card and her having that skill, that talent of something you needed, which is music for an upcoming ceremony, and that being in that time frame where you need it. I'm finding that to be stranger to me or more curious.
But see, to me, the other one is just equal. I can't pick because to dial a wrong number, get this guy who happens to own this hotel, who gives us this venue. But here is the crux. And this is what I want your audience to take away. Okay. How easy would it have been when Jerry said, I'll call you later this afternoon? And I said, oh, no, you don't have to. I mean, this is a wrong number. I have nothing to talk to you about. I mean, I just think it's really strange that I got you on the phone, but I have nothing to say to you, right? It was bigger than me. I said, no, please, you have to call me back. We have to talk about this. And how easy would it have been when this woman said, should I slide the card in your mail slot? I go, yeah, thank you so much. I can't believe you found it. I think it's just wild, but yeah, just slide it through. Bigger than me. By saying, no, we have to meet. That was the action.
The action.
So that's an example of coincidence that yields the miracle.
Yeah, I love that. So it's really when a coincidence happens, instead of closing yourself off, really being open and taking that action to see what that coincidence might lead to. And that might be the miracle. Sophia, I'm wondering, I heard some advice for listeners who are considering redrawing their path in terms of looking for the coincidences, recognizing it, taking action. Is there any other advice you would give to others who are considering redrawing their paths?
Well, I would say trust your intuition. And if they feel like they would like to redraw, but they don't know what it is, to just ask yourself, if I didn't have to worry about money or schooling or anything, what would I really love to do? And just see what comes up for you. And also, I would like to have listeners sort of go back to things that happened in their life and see, what if they went down the other street? People could start thinking back to, if this hadn't happened, then this wouldn't have happened. Then see where that takes you. That's the key.
Sophia, where can people find you? And is there anything you want to share? I'll include your books in the show notes.
Well, my website, which is sophiademas.com.
Okay.
And I invite people to go to my influencers page. Okay, so there's 8 people that I have had personal contact with that I consider to be my mentors. And there's some really interesting people there, but the one that I find absolutely the most amazing is Abbess Amelia Nee. She's a nun. That's all I'm going to say because it is absolutely a most mind-boggling story. So
Awesome.
sophiademas.com, and people can find my books through there and my awards. And if they want to contact me, I would love to hear from you.
Great. I'm on the edge of my seat now and I want to go check out her story, but I really appreciate you sharing your story with Redraw Your Path, Sophia.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to Redraw Your Path with me, Lynn Debilzen. If you liked the episode, please rate and review. That helps more listeners find me. And don't be shy. Reach out and connect with me on LinkedIn and sign up for my e-newsletter at redrawyourpath.com. I can't wait to share more inspiring stories with you. See you next week.